All right, welcome back to the New Equity Network show. I'm Michael Yorba, your host, and co-host is Jared Fabriello. And we're talking to Richard Groome, President, CEO, Urban Barns Foods. Urbanbarns.com is the web address, and the symbol is URBF. All right, Richard, when we left off, we were talking about the kosher certification and what it means. You've got the cleanest food around, if I may say that, but the other end of it is the consumers and the chefs that buy your product to prepare their food in the restaurants. Talk to us about that.
Michael, it's a very good point. The chefs were really the first place we went to because if you think about it, it's counterintuitive initially to think about growing food for human consumption in a warehouse with LED lights. And although our cubic farming system is simply incredible in terms of the yields it can produce per square foot of space utilized, if you don't have the adoption from consumers as well as the chefs, which are considered the experts in culinary emerging food trends, you're dead in the water. So the first thing we did is we tested the products when we were producing in our test facility in British Columbia, and our first test client was the Fairmont Hotel, the Pacific Rim in Vancouver. The chef said initially, the head chef said this is not possible, and we just happened to have our head scientist, because we have a research partnership with McGill University in Montreal where we have 12 PhDs and scientists working on optimizing everything we do, by the way, in a non-genetically modified manner. And Chef Darren said upon meeting our head scientist for dinner when he was out in Vancouver doing some research for us, Chef Darren said within an hour, he says, I'll take whatever you guys can produce because the product is simply outstanding. He tested the product and visited the plant, and he was extremely impressed. So once we moved our facilities to Montreal last year and we set up shop, the first thing we did is starting to have show and tells, in other words, tours for the chefs. And we did a Fairmont hotel tour, and we brought in 6 to 8 of the head chefs of all the Fairmont hotels in Ontario and in Quebec. And needless to say, they were very surprised. We have some footage of that on our website, by the way. They were very surprised of the look, texture, feel, and ultimately taste. If you don't have the taste in the product, you're not going to sell your product. So the reaction from the culinary community, and I can tell you this, many of the chefs in Quebec are obviously French, but they're not French from Quebec. They're French from France, and they're far more difficult to win over than any other chef I've seen because they're more picky, and they were extremely impressed. And we started with the food service and hospitality business. We're now servicing over 50 clients in the food service and hospitality business, and we're going into retail stores, retail chains now, and we're going to be approved, if not already, on a couple of other key accounts that we will communicate in short order to our shareholders.
So you're a pioneer in this field, from my understanding. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I am one of many, but no one is doing cubic farming. Many of our competitors are doing what we call vertical farming. So if a regular consumer like yourself, myself, and our listeners, or your listeners, if they believe there's a problem with too much pesticides and all this genetic modification that's happening, and they believe that we should collectively try to reduce our carbon footprint and also eat leafy green vegetables more often because our doctors say they're far better for us than potato chips and other products that we all love to binge on sometimes, then this is quite likely the wave of the future. Not to mention the fact that, we're going to approach 10 billion of people on this planet, And as we get scaled up, our costs will reduce, we expect, fairly dramatically. Remember, it's similar to a cell phone, similar to a TV. When the new cell phones come out and when the new TVs come out, they're usually quite expensive in terms of pricing. And as you get volume, the prices go down accordingly. And that's where we're at now. We need to get some much bigger volume clients, and then our prices and our costs will go down accordingly. And we're now looking at various locations around the world. Ideally, our business model is looking out, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, is to put 20 locations in North America and 20 locations in the rest of the world. As much as we can, we would like to partner with folks and create a global brand called Urban Barns Foods, cubic farming. We guarantee no pesticides and we guarantee no GMOs. And for the life of me, I can't see a lot of companies that are doing that guarantee right now.
No. Jared has a question for you.
Yeah, what is the difference between cubic farming and vertical farming?
Well, essentially, Jared, we're doing vertical farming, but in our cubic farming machines. So we're branding everything we're doing cubic farming. We have a dramatically reduced labor cost because we don't have staff going up scaffoldings 10, 20, 30, 40 feet to harvest the plants and to plant the plants. In our cubic farm, especially the Generation 4 machine, in one cycle, we haven't talked about this, but we can do about 16 cycles on lettuce a year. A regular farm can do about 2, and a greenhouse can do about 10, depending on the scale, the size and configuration of the greenhouse. So with 16 cycles, you got a lot of product coming out basically every 21 days. And our lettuce now grows in about 21 days. Excuse me. And if we want a very large lettuce, we'll push it to 30, 35 days. Our lettuces tend to be a little smaller than what we grow in Salinas Valley. And also they last longer. They have much higher nutrition levels as well. Lasting longer gives us a better shelf life because we've picked it just in time, right? We haven't been on a truck for 4 to 7 days. And, there's some places in the world where they get their fresh produce literally in 10 to 15 days after it's picked. So for the high volume and high perishable products, that's really not good because the shelf life is some instances down to 1 day.
And are you also branding and selling the fertilizers and foods that the plants are consuming?
That's a good question. I was in Salinas Valley last week, and we met with the number one organic solid and liquid nutrient supplier, and we're not going to sell the nutrients. This is not a franchise deal or a licensing deal. We want to create a global brand. So to keep it simple, we'd like to create the Google of fresh, fine fruits and vegetables on a global basis. That's our mission, if you will, our corporate mission, and to be the leader in controlled environment agriculture with pesticide and GMO-free produce. So in answer to your question is we don't intend to license, and we do not intend to franchise. We want to build good, strong local partnerships in different geographic areas and control the brand and control the brand message as much as possible because we think that creates the optimum shareholder value in the mid to long term.
All right, we've got 1 minute left in the interview. Real quick, the outside locations, you mentioned 20 domestically and then 20 outside the United States. Give us an idea where you're growing to.
Well, we're looking very seriously at obviously New York tri-state area. We'd like to locate one there in the near future. We are in the process of completing a financing in Montreal to increase our production capacity by some 500% with our new Generation 4 machines. Once that's done, we'll have greater clarity on when our next barn will be up and running. We have numerous financial institutions looking at us, very intrigued and waiting for us to complete the Montreal facility. Once that's done, we should be good to go after 2 or 3 growing cycles and tests. And we're also looking at Las Vegas as a very key market for the food service and hospitality business, and also down the East Coast.
Jeffrey, we've got to run, but thank you so much for taking the time, Richard, for being on the show with us. I really appreciate it. All right, you've been listening to Richard Groome, Michael Yorba, Jared Fabriello on the New Equity Network show, urbanbarnsfoods.com.